Acquit, admonish, adamant, adroit, aesthetic. Did I say adept? It wouldn't matter because those aren't the right 6 A's, right? 6 A's of project-based learning. And this one is one I think we added. I think this might be the 7th. Applying standards, but it's super important. Welcome to PBL Simplified for Teachers, where we break down your PBL need-to-knows to simplify the PBL process for your classroom. One of my mentor teachers loved teaching about the Middle Ages. He would bring the learners in, they'd sit on the floor, he'd tell stories. They were ridiculously engaging. Sometimes teachers would show up just to hear them. The learners would go through and do everything that he ever asked them to do. And they still remember that project. The problem is that the Middle Ages were not standards in the 8th grade curriculum. There's no way we can get away with that at this point in time. Bruce was 100% good for kids in his old school ways. There's no way that it works anymore. Like, things are just too tightly packed, and maybe the way that we're judging schools is a little bit different. I don't know what it is, but there's no way that a project that is fun to do with learners but doesn't have any standards in it, there's no way that fits in your year. It doesn't fit in your curriculum map. So what do we do about that? We do that by saying we apply standards right off the bat. If you come to a Magnify Learning workshop, either by yourself or as a whole school, we are going to start with standards. We bust out your power standards, put some of those together, and say, let's form a project or a PBL unit around that. And it may sound monotonous. It may, like, you don't take the weekend and say, hey, you want to come over and read the standards book together? Like, we'll see where they overlap. It'll be crazy. Like, you don't really do that. But there is a piece of creativity that's really fun to say, like, what are your standards that are typically a little bit dull, that you don't have learners that are engaged? And now let's creatively brainstorm how they fit into the real world, what community partners fit, and what your learners can do. We always come up with something exciting that teachers are ready to get behind, right? Because it comes from you, the teacher, in the workshop, right? Like, you're the learner. We want you to be engaged. We want you to bring out your expertise and your flash for your classroom, because you've got to live it. But we always start from the standards. And again, those standards are there for a reason. We talked about some of this in academic rigor, but I think it's worth talking about again. We're not scared of standards. They're there for a reason. They're used in the real world. Our job as that content expert is to be that bridge for our learners of where the standards fit and then where they fit in the real world, so that we can ease them in to those real world positions. And what we find each time when we start matching up the standards with community partners is we find that the things you've always done still fit. The lab that you've always done, it just has a more context and more purpose to it. That lesson plan that you have that just always works with learners and they always learn that particular content piece really well, it still fits. Now it just has context around it and additional meaning. So everything you've ever done doesn't get thrown out in project-based learning. You take those standards-based units and lessons that you've done before, we add authenticity, community partners, and purpose in a whole new way. And as we repackage that, your learners start to buy in and they're more engaged. But it still has to start with that foundation of applying those standards. We don't run away from standards in any way in this conversation. We start with them, we apply them so that we get deeper learning out of our learners. And as we do that, we start to engage our learners, we tackle boredom, and we transform your classroom.